Hallo Deutschland. My name is Julia Sneeringer, and I'm a professor of German history at the City University of New York. I've published work on the social history of early rock and roll in Hamburg, and more relevant to this forum, a study of political propaganda for women voters during the Weimar Republic. So Torsten and his team have asked me to offer some commentary on the American elections from my own perspective here in the US. I live in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, where I grew up. So let me tell you what I think is happening here and what I think is at stake in this election. First of all, the stakes could not be higher. I mean, everything is at stake, from specific issues such as reproductive rights and the environment to democracy itself. Trump is an authoritarian with no respect for his office, no respect for democratic governance, and no respect for the American people, including his own supporters, whom he's actually called disgusting. And this was before the pandemic, which has been made infinitely worse by Washington's complete lack of leadership, except perhaps when it comes to not wearing masks. They're great leaders in that regard. But Trump has reduced the Republican Party to a personality cult. So this election is really a referendum on him. That said, Joe Biden also has to make the affirmative case for himself and for the Democrats. I live in Pennsylvania, which is one of the so-called purple states, is both red and blue, and it tends to swing in one direction or the other. Pennsylvania is currently under a Democratic government, a Democratic governor and lieutenant governor. Um, and the other thing about Pennsylvania that's important is that it's Joe Biden's backyard. Pennsylvania has known Joe Biden for 40 years. And he is well loved here, despite his gaffes, despite his mistakes. Joe Biden is somebody that Pennsylvania knows and feels very comfortable with. His home state of Delaware is in the same media market as Philadelphia. And as Joe Biden always reminds us, he was born in Scranton. So Joe Biden has been comfortably ahead in Pennsylvania by at least about 6 percentage points all year. Of course, that's never, there's never reason to be complacent, but Biden is in many ways the ideal candidate for Pennsylvania. In terms of issues in Pennsylvania, I mean, Pennsylvania is always about jobs. Fracking has replaced some of the manufacturing jobs that have been lost in Pennsylvania since the 70s, which is the main reason why Joe Biden will not renounce it, despite his general support for some version of the Green New Deal. And the issue of fracking is also something that Trump has begun to hit Biden on very heavily, claiming that Biden wants to ban it. So pay attention to that particular issue. Pennsylvania still also has a lot of small-scale manufacturing as well. When I talk to my extended family out in Berks County, Lancaster County, in the more central parts of the state, most of them, not all, I have a few Republicans in the family, but most of my family are quite angry about Trump's trade war with China, which has had real consequences for them. So, jobs are always sort of Thema eins in Pennsylvania. Then there are always the culture war issues. Abortion is less prominent of an issue this year, and Joe Biden's demonstratively sincere Catholicism plays very well in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a very heavily Catholic state. That said, Trump's white identity politics have definitely taken center stage in terms of cultural issues, and they certainly resonate in that part of the state that people often refer to as the T. You have Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and then this sort of T that is often dismissed as basically Appalachia, Kentucky, Alabama. It's more complicated than that. But, white identity politics do play well in that T part of the state. Trump has his hardcore fans. who will not be swayed by logic. They will not be swayed even by the direct pain of COVID-19. And those voters give Trump a floor of about 40%. But especially with the pandemic, Biden has been doing very well with constituencies that have been turned off by Trump. And here we're talking about white women, college educated women, but also non college educated women, and also senior citizens. And yes, while everyone was worried about Biden's ability to inspire young people, Biden has been nailing down the vote among senior citizens who actually turn out to vote in very large numbers. 1 in 4 Pennsylvania voters is over the age of 60, and Biden has been polling extremely well with them. In Pennsylvania, all eyes always turn to the Philadelphia and the Pittsburgh suburbs. Philadelphia and Pittsburgh themselves, the cities, are very solidly Democratic. The issue there is generally turnout. Can you get people to turn out to vote? And Philadelphia, certainly, and the African American vote is tremendously important. African Americans make up about 50% of the population here, so high turnout among them is essential to any Democratic victory. But the suburbs is where everyone really pays attention, because the suburbs is where you do get that swing sometimes back and forth between Democrats and Republicans. Biden promises to do very well in the suburbs. And this was revealed in the last set of national elections, the midterm elections in 2018. Those elections showed the depth of anger at Trump, especially among women who turned out in huge numbers for the Democrats, both as voters and also as first-time candidates. And from where I sit, I see the energy still on the Democrats' side. The Republicans are acting like a party that expects to lose. The main thing, however, to worry about with the Republicans is their demonstrated willingness to cheat. And so unless the Democratic vote is so overwhelming that a winner can be declared on election night, which may happen, Pennsylvania will likely become the site of legal challenges, particularly to our system of mail-in voting. This is the first year in which every Pennsylvanian can vote by mail, no questions asked. And so obviously there are some bureaucratic snafus that have come up. The Republicans have been trying at every turn to have ballots invalidated on technicalities. So when I talk to you live on election night, I may be either very happy or deeply worried. Just one last note here. We know that you're watching in Europe, but I personally think that you're getting directly involved in our election would be seen as foreign meddling of the wrong kind. Certainly Trump is not opposed to foreign meddling, but not only of a particular kind. And besides, the Americans who already care about world opinion are already very firmly pro-Biden. But please know that a majority of Americans have been against Trump from day one. So keep your fingers crossed for us that we can overcome the structural racism of the Electoral College. Thank you. I'll talk to you again on election night.